my own notes, I talked about in the past meetings that we should have a small committee, which I volunteered. I would chair the committee, a subcommittee, that would report back to this board and vetting through all the items. I have a list. Remember, I was gathering a list of each member's ideas, and we should vet them. So then we give the finance committee an opportunity to sit on this committee. Same thing with the CPC and anyone else, any other interested parties and any changes that we potentially may make.
Mr. Chair? Yes. I'm a little bit confused. I think we've had, 3 meetings on this, or 3 discussions on this, and all of the items that were on here were discussed at length as if we were going to approach them for October town meeting. And I don't think that they were, the fact that they were put on as a warrant, okay, meant that we were ready to go forward. So I'm a little confused now that we would, at this point in the game, so to speak, we're pulling back. So I'm very surprised. I thought this was something that you were really strong on, and some of them are really good ideas, actually. But I don't understand the pullback at this point. I guess I need a better explanation, if you don't mind.
I'd like to respond, sure. When I brought this idea forward, it was to make sure across the town, all interested parties had an opportunity to at least be part of the discussion. I agree, this board have had some lengthy discussions regarding some of these items, okay? But that we're just one board. We are no different than CPC, Finance Committee, School Committee. They all should have an opportunity to look at what we're proposing and how it may or may not impact them. That's all I want to do. Also, the public. So when we make a decision that could affect people in the public, for example, we use, just as an example, the town warrant, removing it from mailing it out to all the homes, which I support, by the way, but we should just make sure that we take the opportunity to listen, okay, and then move forward. We may not make everyone happy in the final decision, but we should at least have an opportunity to sit with all those interested parties. What we're changing here isn't something, if we don't do it, that we take any risk onto the town. That's how I envisioned it when I proposed the idea.
Mr. Chair. Maybe
Mr. Delaney.
maybe I can come up with a workable solution that satisfies everyone. Maybe not. I think we can address some of these now, and others we can delay action to a later date. I would suggest we take a look at both the April and October town meeting, changing both of those. Town meeting procedures in terms of where the warrant will be available, just posting it on the website to the vast majority of residents in town. We can deal with that now. I had hoped that we could deal with the timing of town elections this evening, but I don't think we have sufficient information from town clerk. She did, in response by email today, indicate that she did have an issue with moving the election to June following a June town meeting, concerns there. But what I had brought up at our last meeting, which I hoped she was going to address, is moving it out to be in line with a state election to verify one way or the other whether or not it could or could not be done, whether it's either a state primary or a state general election. I think it makes sense to move it out post-April town meeting or June town meeting if we choose to move it out to June. The other items, maybe we can delay those. The CPC issue, I think that can be handled administratively and taken off completely. Concerning the financial procedures, that can be vetted. And the other issue concerning 10-year, periodic 10-year review of the town charter, that can be vetted and dealt with at a later time. But I think the other, what I would consider administrative issues concerning timing of both town meetings, town meeting procedure in terms of where the warrant is made available, and also I would hope we could still possibly deal with the issue of town election. Because I would like to see that in terms of, certainly at a cost savings point of view, and also in terms of a greater turnout at town elections. If you're able to legally either match that up with a state primary or state general election, you'll get a greater turnout, there'll be cost savings associated, I would expect, with doing it jointly with one of those elections. I don't know what the board's feeling is on that, but that's the way I think we could probably proceed. Instead of scrapping this entire article, we can deal with what I would consider the administrative changes that seem, really don't need to have full public input, but those other issues, Michael, I would side with you and say they should be vetted in more detail. I don't have an issue with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Steve,
You know, again, we put in a lot of time, and I have, to some degree, I agree with Sean that there are some items on here that probably could be voted on, discussed and then voted on. But there was, I guess, say a month of wrangling back and forth, trying to figure out what was the best thing to do. And the CPC, unfortunately, was never really part of the conversation until really last week, not last week, but our last meeting on the 16th. And there were concerns brought out at the last meeting. And even at that meeting there, we were still going forward with the possibility of a contract, with some review of some other items, and now it's to stop. And again, it took up an awful lot of our time. I don't mean to be repetitive on that, but we have to be careful when we come up with programs like this or ideas like this, that, you know, I mean, I don't recall, Mike, you mentioned the subcommittee that you were willing to chair. I don't recall that, but I think that's a good idea. And I mean, if we had done that in, let's say, the first meeting, that would have been fantastic, because then the process could have gone forward. But I don't recall that, because we still had 2 subsequent meetings to discuss these items afterwards. So I think we as a board have to consider our steps as we proceed, so that we don't come into a situation looking like, oh, all of a sudden, we're stopping, so do we know what we're doing? I mean, it doesn't look good. So we need to really, you know, cross our Ts, dot our Is, and when we come up with an idea, present it, review it, put a little subcommittee together, as Mike was suggesting, and then go forward. But the way that this was handled at this time, all right, the scuttlebutt around town was we were going forward with a big charter change. Okay, big,
Jeff,
you know, relatively
I have to remind
speaking.
you, Jeff,
know.
I have to remind you, every meeting that this has been on the agenda has been me bringing my ideas forward, was the first ones. Then I had asked the board to provide me their inputs, which I only received a few. I brought them here, we went through what were the ideas that were presented. We weren't, they was not on the agenda to vet. Never at any time were they on the agenda to vet. They were just to present the ideas. At every one of those meetings, I did say, we need to make sure we communicate this with the other boards that it may have an effect on. The residents in town should have an opportunity to speak on it. And then all of a sudden, in the last meeting, they showed up here to being prepared for a warrant article, including the CPC.
Well,
So you're wrong, I think you're wrong. I think the last meeting was the only one we really spent putting some teeth into it. But again, I can't emphasize enough, I don't think it's appropriate that this board just takes it and moves forward with it, while giving respect and opportunity to others to at least pipe in.
I guess the question is, how did it become a warrant item? I mean, from my vantage point here, your idea, and a variety of ideas and with additional input, was brought up as a warrant. So I'm under the impression throughout this whole thing that this warrant
good
item was
question.
brought forward by you.
No, the chair asked the town administrator to include it as a warrant article because the board was discussing it, and there appeared to be an intent to make some changes.
But that wasn't. Apparently, we were just discussing it.
Well,
When we're discussing something, we're discussing it, it's on the table.
I understand
right?
that.
It appeared to me, and I think a number of us here, that we wanted to go forward and propose some administrative changes to the charter, right? Now, beyond that, Michael had suggested, and I remember him saying this, that some of these bigger changes or other ideas should be handled by a subcommittee, giving everyone an opportunity to discuss it. So, yes, you could say that a couple of these things, maybe we're not interested in moving forward at this time. That's what we're here for tonight, right? We're gonna have to make a decision on what items remain, or the whole thing gets taken out, or something gets added to it. But the warrant's gonna press, we're gonna sign the warrant this evening, right? And we have to make a decision on what we wanna do.
But the suggestion by Mike was pretty much, if I understood him correctly, was to drop this whole thing.
Well, that's
No.
his suggestion.
Oh, accept the first item, but drop everything else, to be clear.
Mr. O'Leary.
Yes to all the above. That's what took place. I'm not surprised to see it on here being presented as a proposed warrant article that we have to make a decision on this evening. Not the least bit surprised that it's appearing here. I don't agree with most of it at this particular point in time, but that's okay. That's for us to decide collectively what's gonna be included or not. I think we were all in agreement as far as the April to June town meeting. And I think that's the biggest positive thing we can do as far as our budgetary process. The rest of it, as far as, the proposal for the new thing, to me, you can include it or not, it doesn't matter to me, one way or the other, because we can implement it. May give us a little teeth with the school department, but again, to me, that's something that should be vetted with the school department, let them weigh in, which they haven't been given the opportunity to do. So, if we're going to do anything, the only thing I would suggest is just delete the first available Monday in April and replace it first available Monday in June, period. We have some concerns that have been raised in relation, from the town clerk in relation to the October town meeting and what that may be. What hasn't been addressed is Sean's suggestion of moving the election to September. Which, I may or may not be in favor of, but the opportunity to discuss that is down the road, not tonight. So to me, if we're gonna do anything, just that one, because we're all in agreement on that. And that isn't a significant thing. I'm a little bit concerned that if we're going to be proposing legislation, special legislation to change our charter, it should be, maybe be a comprehensive document with several things that we want to do all at once. But, this would be the first one that the legislature in the deliberations could understand based upon their budget and how it impacts municipalities. It should be relatively routine in order to facilitate it happening. Anything else in here is subject to discussion, changing election times, changing the structure of the charter in relation to employees who are hired by one board and, report to another board's individual. Those things are gonna stimulate a lot more discussion. So if we're gonna do anything, just do that one there. If we can't agree on that, then scrap the whole thing, put it to the subcommittee, bring it up at the April town meeting for consideration, and you'll be a whole nother legislative session before we even talk about it. So if we want to facilitate the change in relation from April to June, let's do that now. And then remand the rest of this, along with inviting the school committee, inviting the finance committee and the other appointed or elected boards, input in relation to any specific charter changes they may want or may suggest, and then have a vetting process. So, I would be in favor of just handling the April to June issue tonight. And if we can't come to an agreement on that because someone wants to include something else, then I'm in favor of scrapping the whole thing until it goes to the subcommittee and comes back to us. But I think the first issue is probably the easiest thing to get through the legislature, just because they'll have a keen understanding and awareness as to the impact that they're having on us from setting our annual budget.
But I think if you move that, you'd want to move the October out as well for a couple of weeks to give us
Yeah,
additional
but see,
time.
I'm not necessarily of the same mind, and we haven't had a lot of discussion about it. And I just quickly breezed through what the town clerk forwarded to us, but it seemed to have some sort of, some issues that warrant some consideration and some discussion.
And
And
we
I
had
can honestly
asked
say,
for
I didn't
input.
spend enough time on it, because I got home late, I just opened it up, I've got to print it up.
Well,
And again, that could be done as part of a comprehensive package